So the last game of the round, of course, was the Saints up against the Suns at Marvel Stadium. The Suns having a pretty poor record at Marvel in recent times, but they finally broke that streak and won in the end by 19 points. 61 to the Saints, 80 to the Suns. Now, the Suns started well in the first quarter with the first 2 goals of the game, and they got to work really well in their midfield. They were above their opponents by a lot. Now, St Kilda did well to get a goal back pretty quickly, but the Gold Coast were on top heading into quarter time with 2 late goals to lead by 18 points. Now, the Saints started to hold field position to get the first 3 scores of the second quarter, but both teams kicked 2 goals either way before the Gold Coast made a handy break. The Suns kicked the last 3 goals of the first half to comfortably lead by 29 points at the major break. Now, heading into the third term, it felt like the Suns' pressure really dropped off and the Saints really tried to make them pay. However, their shooting at goal was wayward. They kicked 1 goal 6 the Saints to the Suns' 2 behinds, and at 3-quarter time, the Saints, even though they felt a lot closer, only got 4 points back from the halftime margin to be down by 25 points. And in the final term, the Saints did kick an early goal to give the little bit of a shake through the Gold Coast camp, but in the end, the Suns did enough to run away winners by 19 points. So well into the Gold Coast in the end, they were able to run away with the game in the end, even though they haven't been a very good record at Marvel Stadium or away from home this year. It seems like they've got it right. I know they had a pretty down game against the Tigers about a month ago, but seems to be back on the winning streak, which is good to see, and now they find themselves in the top 4, and hopefully the second half of the year, they can push towards their first finals berth and maybe even a top 4 finish, which would be really good for them. I think with St Kilda, I think they've just haven't got enough talent to really push them through. They are getting some players back like Filippo, who seems to be getting some good run in the legs, but unfortunately for St Kilda, they're going to be down for a couple of years to come, I would say. But let's get to the statistics of this game, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for St Kilda. Sharman with 3, Owens with 2 for the Suns. 3 goals to Long, 2 goals to King and Ainsworth. On the disposals for the Saints, Wanganeen Miller with 35, Steele 33, Sinclair 29, 25 to Owens, and Filippo with the 23. And for the Gold Coast, Noah Anderson 36, Miller with the 30, Jeffrey and Noble with 27, and 24 to Rao. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, for the Saints, again, Nasiah Wanganeen Miller 131, Steele 126, Sinclair 119, Owens 109, and Clark with the 93. And for the Gold Coast, Rao with the 126, 118 to Jeffrey and Noah Anderson, 104 to Miller, and 101 to Jared Witts. But before we get to the votes, we have to mention the members' vote for round 10. How the members' vote works for you guys. For the review in 2025, a 3-2-1 voting system is awarded for every single game of the AFL season on the channel. And each round, players who receive 3 votes in the game have a chance to get a bonus vote. I will decide the 4 best players from the round, who will enter a poll exclusive for channel members to vote on, and the winner of that poll will receive the bonus vote for the round, the members' vote. And at the end of the 2025 AFL season, every vote counts. So this is your chance to have your say on the 3rd ever Boundary Riders medalist. So if that appeals to you, or if you just want to show some extra support on the channel, then make sure to click the channel membership link down below and join in the fun. But for now, let's get back into the video. And the members' vote for round 10 goes to Sydney Swans star Isaac Heaney. So now let's get to the votes for this game. 3 votes Noah Anderson, 2 votes Took Miller, and the 1 vote Nasiah Wanganeen Miller. So what a performance from Noah Anderson in the midfield. Was tagged early on by Marcus Windhager, but pretty well shook that off, I thought, in the first half. And in the second half, he had a field day. Had over 20 plus touches just in the second half alone. It really drove his team home. Probably one of the best performances I've seen from him this year. So really led from the front for the Suns. And their former leader in Took Miller got the 2 votes. I'm really liking his season playing off of half forward. And it seems like he's playing a little bit more of a selfless role, but today he really banked in with a couple of really good touches and was really influential for the Suns, especially in the first half, but kept along in the second. And Nasiah Wanganeen Miller, pretty hard to get votes in a losing side in the Boundary Riders votes, but he did exceptionally well for the Saints today. Did everything he could to try and get his team somewhat in the game, but really he was only a one-man band in a lot of the game, in my opinion. So next we go to the MCG. It was the Demons up against Sydney. Demons going into this one as favourites, but they thought that maybe a sneaky chance of the Swans. That was quickly extinguished in the second term. Despite the Swans being able to stay close for the majority of the game, it was the Demons who ran out in the final quarter, comfortably winning by 53 points. 131 to the Ds, 78 to the Swans. Now, there's one injury concern from this game, which was Sam Wicks. Unfortunately, went off in the third term with hamstring tightness and was subbed out pretty soon after. So I don't know if this will leave him out for how many weeks, but really disappointing for the Swans. Now, Charlie Spargo, I do want to quickly mention, he came off in the game with a concussion HIA. It was very interesting circumstances about that happening. However, he wasn't subbed out with a HIA. He was just subbed out for rotations. Cal Mills with the bump. I think he'll probably get weeks for it, but nonetheless, Charlie Spargo wasn't out with concussion, so it means he can play next week. Now, it was a pretty slow start to this game against the Swans and the Demons. It was the D's who kicked the opening 2 goals of the contest and did have field position. However, Sydney did hold strong, and with Sydney getting 2 of the last 3 goals, they were able to stay somewhat close to the Demons, as Melbourne did hold an 8-point lead heading into quarter time. But it was an absolute demolition from the D's in the second quarter, as they had over 15 more inside 50s in the term over Sydney, but couldn't put a meaningful break on the Swans. Despite 11 scoring shots to the Swans too, Melbourne kicked 3 goals 8 in the second term, and at the main break, Melbourne held a 22-point lead, but it easily could have been 52. And in the early moments of the third quarter, it felt like Melbourne finally were going to break away before Sydney made a mini surge when they got 2 in a row, but the Demons quickly regained control with 4 goals in response to push out to a 40-plus point advantage. Now, the Swans did get one late, but Melbourne still held a comfortable 36-point lead heading into the final change. And in the final term, Melbourne finally kicked away. The Demons deserved to win this game by a meaningful margin, and in the end, they ran out winners by 53 points. So well done to Melbourne. They have somehow resurrected their season, and honestly, at the moment, they're one of the most informed teams in the competition. And I still think they need to find some goal kickers up forward, because their midfielders are heavily carrying it right now, other than Cozzy Pickett. So well done to the Demons, though. They've really done well to get their season back on track, and the Swans, I think you can probably write them off at this point. They've got way too many injuries, and the players they do have out there right now probably aren't at AFL level, so I think you can probably rule them out now. But moving to the statistics of this game, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Demons, we had Cozzy Pickett with 5 goals, Melksham with 3, 2 goals to Fritsch, Sparrow and Sharp, and for the Swans, 3 goals to Heaney, 2 goals to Laddams. On the disposals, Christian Salem, Oliver and Langdon all with 31, Petrarca with 28 and Windsor with the 24 for Sydney, Warner with 27, Sheldrick 26, 23 to Grundy and Roberts and 22 to Heaney. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front for the Demons, Max Gawn 140, Christian Salem 139, Oliver 130, Pickett 126 and Langdon with the 121. And for Sydney, Grundy with the 134, Chad Warner with the 112, Heaney with the 106, Roberts with the 94 and Sheldrick with the 86. But getting to the votes in this game, 3 votes Cozzy Pickett, 2 votes Max Gawn and the 1 vote to Christian Petrarca. Cozzy Pickett, 5 goals 4, honestly could have had one of the all-time games, did miss a couple of opportunities, but he was a highlight reel all game. He just looked so dangerous when going near the football, and the crowd rose every single time he went near it. So well done to Cozzy Pickett. Max Gawn, he's almost having a career best year, which is insane to say from a player like him, but he did so well today. And finally, Christian Petrarca, you could have raffled the 1 vote for so many Demons players. Christian Salem was pretty close. However, the reason why I've gone with Christian Petrarca is his burst from stoppage was just way too good, and they were absolutely smashed in the midfield, the Swans today, led by Christian Petrarca. So the first game on Sunday was the Crows up against the Eagles, and the Eagles surprisingly made this a bit of a battle in the first half, but eventually the Crows shone through and ran out winners by 66 points. 128 to the Crows, 62 to the Eagles. Now, there's one injury concern from this game, which was Jake Waterman. Unfortunately, suffered an injury in the late parts of the game. We're getting crunched in a pack, unfortunately injuring his shoulder. But going to the game itself, it seemed like the Eagles were up for the fight throughout the opening term, as they won the territory battle for the majority of the first quarter, and the scores were all square halfway through the opening term. However, Adelaide getting the last goal of the quarter at the first change, Adelaide led by that kick. Now, Adelaide's pressure was even better in the second term, but the Eagles continued to hold field position, but unfortunately just didn't put it on the scoreboard and take advantage. And with Adelaide getting 3 goals in a row and holding a 23-point advantage late in the half, it felt like they were readying themselves to blow the game open. But a goal on the stroke of halftime from the Eagles brought the margin back to 17 points at the major break. However, it always felt like the damn wall was going to break, and in the second half of the third term, it finally broke and the Crows pounced. Adelaide kicked 7 goals in the quarter, 5 of them coming in the last 15 minutes of the term, and at the last change, they led by 57 points. And in the final term, the margin hovered around a 10-goal margin, and in the end, Adelaide ran out winners by 66 points. So it was a great start from the Eagles. They did really well to stay in touch about half-time, but it always felt like the Crows were going to run over the top, and a 10-goal win is not a very great performance for Adelaide. I'm definitely thinking they're going to take that every day of the week. They jump into the top 4 after the performance as well. So good performance from the Crows and Eagles. There was no hope they were going to win this game, so not really much of a surprise there. But moving to the statistics of the game, of course, on the multiple goal kickers, Josh Richelli with the 5 goals straight, Dawson, Thilthorpe, Peatling and Pedler all with 2 goals to the Eagles, Waterman with the 3, Allen with the 2. On the disposals for Adelaide, Dawson with 27, 26 to Worrell and Berry, 25 to Laird and 23 to Rankin. For the Eagles, Duggan with 23, 20 to Marrick, 19 to Hewitt, 18 to Baker, 17 to Harley Reid. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, Jordan Dawson just continues on his great form, the 139, 128 to O'Brien, 123 to Perry, 113 to Thilthorpe and 110 to Richelli. And for the Eagles, I thought this was maybe in their three-quarter time scores, but this is in fact what they got at the final margin. Tom Cole with 74, 72 to Graham, 70 to Duggan and Allen, and 69 to Ryan. So let's get to the votes. 3 votes, Jordan Dawson, 2 votes, Josh Rochelle, and the 1 vote to Riley Thilthorpe. Jordan Dawson, in my opinion, leading the Brownlow medal. He is doing so well at the moment. Not having 30-plus disposals every week, but he's impacting the scoreboard, involved in so many score involvements for Adelaide. Teams need to seriously start putting some work into Jordan Dawson because he is almost single-handedly getting his team over the line every single week. He was so good today with 27 touches, 5 scoring shots, 2 of them being goals. So if he kicked 5 goals, could have been one of the all-time games, but still deserved the 3. Throughout the preseason, Josh Rochelle was called by the coach to say he has like one of the best preseasons he's ever seen. It's been a little bit of a slow burn in my opinion so far. He's had a pretty decent year, but today 5 goals, did really nicely, banked in. And Riley Thilthorpe had a bit of a down week last week. First time this year he was held goalless. Today he had 5 scoring shots. Probably should have done a little bit better, but 17 touches, 7 marks, and 2 goals, 3. He was very good for them. Pretty much their most dangerous forward throughout the whole entire day. So the final game on Saturday night was the Dockers up against Port Adelaide at Optus Stadium. And despite a very contested first half in very wet conditions, the Dockers ran away with it in the second half and won by 49 points. 100 to the Dockers, 51 to Port Adelaide. Now, there are a couple of injury concerns from this game. First of all, Cooper Simpson unfortunately copped a big hit to his shoulder in the opening term and he was subbed out soon after. Now, the club has came out and said the injury is to his AC joint, so it's a little bit unknown at this stage as to when he will return. And on Darcy Byrne-Jones, he received a massive knock from Alex Pearce in the second quarter, and then he was subbed out soon after that. Now, on that hit, I hope that Alex Pearce doesn't get a couple of weeks, because it felt like it was in the contest, but, I mean, with a concussion, it usually does mean weeks for Alex Pearce, unfortunately. But getting to the game itself, Port Adelaide started really well, being able to control the footy, and were able to kick 3 of the first 4 goals. But credit to the Dockers, as they finished the first quarter with the final 2 goals of it, and led by 2 points at the first break. And Fremantle started well in the second term with the first 2 goals, but Port Adelaide did well to stay in touch. Port Adelaide's pressure lifted as well, which helped them stay close, and with a late goal at halftime, Fremantle only held an 8-point lead. However, once the second half began, the Dockers were on a mission, and not only did Fremantle keep Port Adelaide goalless in the third quarter, but were able to kick 4 of their own, take a comfortable 32-point lead at three-quarter time, and in the final term, it was pretty elementary for the Dockers. Port Adelaide only kicked 2 goals in the second half, and Fremantle continued to pile on the pain in the final quarter, and in the end, the Dockers ran out winners by 49 points. So Fremantle the last couple of weeks have done really well to almost resurrect their season. It looked like it was almost gone a fortnight ago. So well done to them getting 2 important wins, and a win in the wet was very good. So well done to the Dockers. And Port Adelaide, their season's well and truly gone now, I think. They're in the bottom 4. I think the confusion around Ken Hinkley has got to the players, and I really don't know how Port Adelaide are going to be able to resurrect anything from this season. It just seems like a wasted year for the Power. But moving to the statistics of this game, on the multiple goal kickers for the Dockers, Reid with 4, 2 to Dudley and Switkowski. For Port Adelaide, Georgiades with 3, Rioli with 2. On the disposals, 29 to Sarong, 22 to Ryan, 21 to Brayshaw, Chapman and Jackson. And for the Power, Wines with 33, Rosie 27, 25 to Atkins, 24 to Butters and 23 to Bergman. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front for Freo, Jackson with 106, 97 to Sarong and Johnson, 94 to Reid and 92 to Chapman. And for Port Adelaide, Ollie Wines top scorer with the 111, Rosie 105, Drew 102, 89 to Atkins and 88 to Bergman. But now we'll get to the votes, and my brother has given the votes for this one, of course. He has gone 3 votes Luke Jackson, 2 votes Heath Chapman, and the 1 vote to Murphy Reid. So the first game on Saturday night was an intriguing contest between North Melbourne and Collingwood, and at three-quarter time the game was set up for an interesting finish, but in the end the Pies piled on the pain in the final quarter to run out winners by 45 points. North Melbourne 63, 108 to the Pies. Now there's one injury concern from this game, which was Braden Maynard. Unfortunately had an injury to his foot in the opening term and he was subbed out soon after. On early reports, it does seem that the injury was a flare-up of Maynard's plantar fascia, so unfortunately I would be expecting that he'll be out for at least a few weeks, probably even more than that, to try and rest him up for the second half of the year. But getting into the game itself, both teams wasted some chances in the opening term, especially Collingwood, as they had 7 scoring shots but only were able to kick 2 goals. Now the Pies did lead by 8 points at quarter time, but it felt like it could have been a lot more. Now the game continued to be a goal-for-goal contest in the second term, with North Melbourne just being out of grasp of taking the lead. However, the Roos were winning field position, and they finally took the lead late in the quarter. And at halftime, North Melbourne did lead by 9 points. Now, Collingwood started well in the second half with 2 quick goals to take the lead back, and dominated time in the forward half. But their goal kicking was terrible, leaving the door ajar for the Roos. The Pies had 11 scoring shots in the third quarter, but only kicked 3 goals. And with the Kangas getting 2 down the other end, they only faced a 3-point deficit deficit heading into the final break, with a potential upset on the cards. However, in the final quarter, the floodgates opened for Collingwood. They started to convert in front of goal, and it translated onto the scoreboard as the Pies kicked 8-1 in the final quarter, and in the end ran out winners by 45 points. So I think I've said this a few times over the year so far, that some teams, like the better teams, can have a poor day but can still win, and I think that's what Collingwood did today. They didn't play very well. They didn't convert much on the scoreboard. I mean, on the other side of the coin, maybe in another dimension, they would have won this game by 100 points with the scoring shots, but they did enough to run away with it in the final quarter, so well done. And North Melbourne, they're a little bit disappointing. Collingwood had a lot of players out, and it felt like they had a bit of a chance to cause an upset, but I guess in the end, the real quality shone through. But moving to the statistics of this game, for North Melbourne, only multiple goal kicker was Cam Zerhard with the 3 goals. For Collingwood, Elliott with 5, 3 to Membry and 2 to Myercheck. On the disposals for North Melbourne, Daniel with 30, Hardiman with 28 along with Power, 26 to Davies Uniacke and 23 to Stevens. For Collingwood, Nick Dacos 38, 31 to Josh Dacos, 29 to Long, Ed Allen with 24 and Quaynor with the 23. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, for North, it was Dylan Stevens with the 110, Hardiman with 106 along with Tom Power, 97 to Davies Uniacke and 94 to Daniel. And for the Pies, Long with 132, Nick Dacos 129, 101 to Crisp and Josh Dacos and 99 to Quaynor. But again, my brother giving the votes for this one, he's gone Ned Long with the 3 votes, 2 votes to Jamie Elliott and the 1 vote to Nick Dacos. So now we head to the MCG. Hawthorn up against Brisbane. A very interesting contest, this one, with Hawthorn going in as favourites, having a very good record against the Lions, but Brisbane were out on a mission to end their losing streak and came out winners in the end by 33 points. Hawthorn 60, Brisbane 93. Now, it was a good start to the contest for the Lions as they opened this game with the first 2 goals. Hawthorn kicked 2 in the fronts pretty soon after. And with a late goal going Hawthorn's way at the quarter-time break, they led by 4 points. Now, the Lions regained the lead early in the second quarter, but the scores were all square in the latter parts of the second term before Brisbane made a late surge. The Lions kicked 4 late goals, and at half-time, Brisbane led by 23 points. And early in the second half, they made it 5 in a row. Now, the Hawks stopped the rot soon after that point, but both teams traded goals heading into the final break. And at three-quarter time, the Lions held a pretty comfortable 21-point lead. And in the final term, the Lions put the game beyond doubt early in the final term as they kicked the first 3 goals to end their losing streak and run out winners by 33 points. So I did kind of call this in the review. I wasn't strong enough to put the tip on the Brisbane Lions, but I did say that Hawthorn weren't in as good a form as some people were suggesting. And Brisbane may have had a poor record at the MCG in years gone past, but since that grand final, it seems like they're right back in the hunt for MCG success. So Brisbane get back on the winners list. Well done for them. And Hawthorn, like I said, they're not in the greatest form right now. They've been beating teams that are lower than them, which is great, but if they're going to be competing this year, they have to start beating these teams, especially around the mark and at home. So a little bit disappointing on Hawthorn's front. And next week, they have a pretty tough contest against Collingwood, so that's going to be a real danger game for them. But moving to the stats in this one, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Hawks, only multiple was Connor McDonald with the 3 goals for Brisbane, Archie with 4, 3 to Cameron, 2 to Rayner and Morris. On the disposals for the Hawks, Amon with 29, 28 to Morrison, 23 to Newcomb, Warple and Battle. For the Lions, Zorko with 33, Neil 32, Ashcroft 26, 24 to McCluggage and 22 to Ashcroft. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, Amon 105, McDonald and Morrison with the 101, Weddle with 88 and 82 to Warple. And for Brisbane, Zorko 127, Neil 120, Archie 112, Berry 102 and Dunkley with the 93. But to the votes in this game, 3 votes Cal Archie, 2 votes Dane Zorko and the 1 vote to Lockie Neal. So a very early game on Saturday afternoon. It was Carlton up against the Giants. It really feels like there's only going to be room for one team in the final spot this year. And the Giants were able to run away with it in the final term to go out winners by 28 points. Carlton 82, 110 to the Giants. Now it was a high scoring opening term to this game with both teams being able to kick 5 goals. But at the first break, the Giants led by 1 point. Now it's a good start for the Blues, who were dominating field position in the second term, but their usual problems started to surface. They couldn't capitalise with their territory win, with the Blues kicking 1 goal 5 in the second quarter and the Giants kicking the last 2 goals of it. At half-time, the Giants led by 10 points. Now GWS continued to increase their lead early in the second half, but the Blues did get 2 in a row to get within a kick of the GWS Giants. But the Giants just continued to push the lead out to around a 3-goal margin, keeping the Blues at bay. And at the final change, GWS led by 14 points. And when they kicked the first 2 goals of the final quarter, the game seemed basically over. The Blues kicked a few in response to stay somewhat in touch, but the Giants once again pushed away in the final 10 minutes, and in the end, they won by 28 points. So the Giants, it's been a bit of a roller coaster so far, especially in the last 6 weeks or so. They've been able to get a really good performance against the Cats a couple of weeks ago, but other than that, they've been pretty disappointing. They did well to get on the winners list today. We'll get to the goal kickers in a minute because they really did spread it out in their forward 50. But Carlton, their only plan B right now going forward when they don't get it to Curnow and Mackay is to just bomb high, bomb long. It's been a problem for years and they continue to do it. I don't know why they don't change their forward structure when they do it or their entries inside their forward 50, because it is so blatantly obvious for the watcher. I don't know how Carlton don't try to sort it out, but I guess it's maybe a problem with pressure. When pressure gets to these players, they just continue to fall back to what they know. Carlton, a very disappointing sort of season right now, and I really can't see them making finals unless they get on a massive run. So moving to the stats in this one, of course, on the multiple goal kickers for the Blues, Curnow with 3, Fogarty with 2. For the Giants, Hogan with 4, Toby Green with 3, along with Brown and Riccardi, and 2 to Cadman. For the disposals for the Blues, Doherty back in the team with the 30, Walsh with 26, 25 to Cripps, 23 to Chera, and Lord with the 21. And for the Giants, Ash with 28, along with Toby Green, 27 to Whitfield, 25 to Tom Green, and Iden with the 20. And finally, on the AFL fantasy front, for the Blues, Doherty 112, 108 to Chera, 101 to Cripps, 87 to Lord, and 85 to Walsh. And for GWS, Toby Green 133, Ash 114, 93 to Xavier O'Halloran, 85 to Tom Green, and Whitfield with the 80. But my brother, of course, has given the votes for Saturday's games. He has gone, first of all, with this one, 3 votes Toby Green, 2 votes Paddy Cripps, and the 1 vote to Jesse Hogan. So on Friday night, we had dream time at the G, the Bombers up against Richmond, and it was a pretty dour first half before the Bombers really broke away with it late in the third quarter to run out winners by 23 points. 81 to the Bombers, 58 to the Tigers. Now, there are a lot of injuries from this one. First of all, on Essendon, Langford had an issue with his quad in the second term. Unfortunately, he was subbed out just before half-time. It's pretty unfortunate for Langford. He's had a pretty injury-ravaged season so far, but unfortunately, he's going to probably miss another few weeks with that injury. And Zach Reid, really unfortunate here. Doesn't seem too serious. It does seem it's just a bit of hamstring tightness in the third term as he ended up on the bench at the end of the game, but with a guy who's been so riddled by injury in his career, hopefully it's just something minor. And on the Tigers, Tom Dow injured his knee in the second quarter. He was subbed out at halftime. And Sam Lawler had an issue with his hamstring and finished the game on the bench. So a couple of injury concerns for the young Tigers. But on the game itself, it was a good start for the Bombers around the ball, and both teams found it hard to hit the scoreboard. Between both teams, we only saw 3 goals in the opening term, with the Bombers getting 2, though. At the first break, they led by 5 points. Now, the Tigers started to dominate the territory in the second term, but their shots were wayward. They kicked 1 goal 3 in the early stages of the term, and Essendon made their chances count. Despite having more scoring shots, Richmond, Essendon still held the lead at halftime by 9 points. And starting the second half, the Tigers kicked 3 of the first 4 goals to take the lead. But 2 late goals to the Dons saw them lead by 12 points at the final break. And in the final quarter, Essendon really started to dominate. Essendon should have really won by more, as they only kicked 2 goals 7 in the final term to Richmond's 1 goal 2. But in the end, the Bombers did enough to win by 23 points. So I don't think a lot of people were really surprised that Essendon won this game. Both teams coming off a 5-day break, with Richmond being a lot more younger. It was going to be tough for them to back that up. So well done to the Bombers to run out winners here. And on Richmond, I mean, the fact that they've already won so many games already this year that no one really expected, I think you got to give them a lot of credit. They are fighting in a lot more games. It's funny that they've lost so many good players in the off-season, and they're a better team this year than they were last year. They were getting blown out by 100 points or 80 points in a lot of games, and this year they seem like they're fighting in most of them. So you have to give credit to the Tigers, but well done to Essendon. They somewhat keep their finals hopes alive, even though their percentage is absolutely woeful. But moving to the statistics of this game on the multiple goal kickers, Clark on debut kicked 3 goals, 2 goals to Peter Wright and Nick Martin. For Richmond, Ralph Smith, Lawler and Taranto all with 2 goals. On the disposals, for Essendon, Merritt with 37, Martin 35, Roberts 34, McGrath 31 and Caldwell with 29. And for Richmond, Banks 29, 24 to Vlosten, 23 to Hopper and Taranto, and 22 to Broad. And on the AFL fantasy front, Nick Martin with the 166, Zach Merritt with the 149, Caldwell with the 120, Wright with the 111 and Roberts with the 108. And for Richmond, Banks with the 110, Taranto 101, McAuliffe with the 94, 91 to Hopper and 88 to Broad. But let's get to the votes in this game. 3 votes, Nick Martin, 2 votes, Zach Merritt, and the 1 vote to Sam Durham. Nick Martin, what a performance he had today. 35 touches, 26 of them being kicks, 2 goals. He has had an underrated season so far for mine. I think he's in All-Australian form right now. He did start a little bit weird this season, playing a little bit more half-forward, but since he's gone back to that half-back line, he's really thrived in that role. So well done to Nick Martin. Zach Merritt, I don't think he's had many 37 disposal games and not been the best on the ground, but today he got back to his best, been a little bit down the last few weeks, so really well done to Zach Merritt. And I like the game of Sam Durham. I know he didn't have 35 plus touches or anything like that, but he just is such a competitor, Sam Durham, so he got the 1 vote today. So to the first game of round 11, of course, it was set up as a heavyweight bout. The Cats up against the Bulldogs. the Bailey Smith grudge matches I've been calling it all week. It was the Cats who won the ultimate battle, winning by 14 points in an absolute goal fest. 127 to the Cats, 113 to the Bulldogs. Now, it was a pretty controlled start to this game on Bailey Smith's side, but both teams on the scoreboard were rampant. We saw 5 goals go either way in the first term, and despite feeling that the Cats were on top, the Bulldogs held a 3-point lead heading into quarter time. But in the second term, it was all Geelong. Their pressure was immense around the ball, and they translated onto the scoreboard, with the Cats kicking 6 goals in a row, 4 of them coming in the first 10 minutes of the quarter, to give themselves a 32-point lead heading into half-time. However, the Dogs did get a late goal to reduce the margin to 25 points in the major break. It was goal for goal to start the second half. Every time the Dogs started to try and make a charge, the Cats were able to get a goal in response. Now, the Cats did break Cats to a 30-point lead in the third term, but the Bulldogs were able to kick 3 of the last 4 goals in the term to face only a 10-point deficit heading into the final quarter. And when the Dogs kicked an early goal to start the final term, it looked set that maybe the Dogs were going to run over Geelong. But unfortunately for the Bulldogs, they missed some gettable opportunities at goal, and they were made to pay down the other end. Geelong finished with 3 of the last 4 goals to run out winners by 14 points. So Geelong, it's been a bit of an up and down season so far. They've won games and then lost games that they should win. So I've been a little bit hard to try and gauge where they're at, but it was a really good performance today. I know it was down in Geelong, so some people try to give it a little bit easier for them to win games down there, but the Bulldogs have had a pretty decent record in Geelong in years gone past, so I wasn't really concerned about that. That's why I tipped the Dogs, but Geelong did enough today. It was really led by their 2 key forwards in Cameron and Neil, with 11 goals between them, and the Bulldogs simply couldn't hold them down. So really the big winners in the end for the Cats were their tall forwards, and a real coming-of-age game for Shannon Neal. But on the Dogs' point of view, a little bit disappointing. You would have expected a lot better. It was really blown out in that second term when they needed to hold strong. They got blown out. But nonetheless, the Bulldogs still sitting top 8, and I still think they're going to be a real threat at the end of the year. Moving to the statistics of this game, though, on the multiple goal kickers for Geelong, 6 goals to Jeremy Cameron, 5 goals to Shannon Neal, 2 to Manor and Stengel. For the Dogs, 3 goals to Norton and Kennedy, 2 goals to Karmas, Vandermeer and Richards. On the disposals for Geelong, Bailey Smith with 33 along with Max Holmes, 23 to Myers, 21 to Manor and Stewart. And for the Dogs, Liberatore 31, 29 to Richards, 25 to Kennedy, 23 to Bontempelli and 22 to Dale. And finally on the AFL fantasy front, for the Cats, Bailey Smith 126, Holmes 117, 106 to Myers, 105 to Atkins and 103 to Cameron. And for the Western Bulldogs, Egg Richards with a 117, 114 to Liberatore, 111 to Kennedy, 102 to Bontempelli and 97 to English. But getting to the votes in this game, this was super tough, but we've gone with 3 votes Jeremy Cameron, 2 votes Matt Kennedy, and the 1 vote to Brian Myers. This was so tough. I wanted to give so many votes to different players. Ed Richards could have got a vote. Liberatore, Bontempelli on the Bulldogs. On the Cats, Max Holmes could have got a vote. Tom Atkins was very good as well. Bailey Smith was very unlucky to miss out on a vote here. But Jeremy Cameron, first of all, I gave him 3 votes. He kicked 6 goals. Without him, they don't win this game. He was so good up forward. Matt Kennedy, he was really good today. 25 touches and 3 goals as a midfielder. That is really well done from him. He has been arguably, I know people have, and myself have also said that the best recruit so far this year has been Bailey Smith, but Matt Kennedy's got to be right up there. He's been brilliant. And Brian Myers, the reason why he's got the 1 vote today is I think he set up so many opportunities for them today, Geelong. He has been a little bit down in my opinion so far this year, so for him to set up a lot of opportunities at goals so far on Thursday night was a big reason why he got the 1 vote. Bailey Smith was a little bit unlucky to miss out, but I just felt like after quarter time his influence wasn't as big as what it was, so that's why he missed out on votes on Thursday night. But guys, thanks for watching this episode of the review. I hope you did enjoy it. And if you want to listen to the full episode, then make sure to go check us out on Spotify, as you can listen to the full episode there the morning after the round finishes. But that is all from me, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe if you did enjoy it. But for now, we'll catch you all in the next one.